All right, so we have a good friend, a good dear friend to the show, our friend from Syracuse, Matt, who is, unfortunately for me, a really big Islander fan, and they're having a really good season. So,
You're,
Matt, welcome to the show.
you're too kind, buddy. You're too kind. I mean, to speak with the great Derek and all of his sports knowledge is a true honor on this podcast. I don't know if your listeners know, but the minute I knew you should have done a podcast was we were sitting watching not Step Brothers, Wedding Crashers. And in
Oh,
the background, when Owen Wilson is sitting there depressed as hell, an Orioles game is on in the background, and we're sitting there watching the movie, and you go, "Oh, that's the '06 ALDS," and off
no,
the top of your head, just knew it without even thinking twice.
you have it pretty much correct. So it was an Orioles game, and it was just they showed Jay Gibbons, who was a decent player for a few years, like running the base. I was like, oh, that's Jay Gibbons. Like, who the fuck would know that?
But knew the game down to like the littlest details. So
Yeah,
I'm glad you
there's
got this
something
this venture started up, buddy.
there's something wrong with me, but if I can take advantage of it somehow, I'll do it. So yeah, so we wanted to do a show at about midseason. Islanders have played about 33 games, I
Yep.
think, and the Rangers are at a few less, I think 31.
Yep.
So I just wanted to know first off your thoughts on what we've seen to this point, and then eventually we'll get into what you expect moving forward for the Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, they're facing these two conflicting storylines, right? The first one is they're greater than the sum of their parts. It's all coaching. There's very little talent on the team. And the second one that kind of emerged is all of a sudden Anders Lee is down, and there's enough reason to doubt them the rest of the season. You know, will they be towards the bottom of making the playoffs in one of those final four spots? Will they slip out and maybe Philly slips in and they miss? You know, and you can't have both of those, right? You can't be totally dependent on one person, but then have a bunch of crap parts that are totally a formula of Trotz. So it's been interesting to see so far. But despite all of that chatter and not necessarily controlling their own narrative, they're top of the division right now. So what's there to complain
Yeah,
about if you're a fan?
right. And the way it seems right now, again, things can change, but it looks like there's a good chance they're gonna make the playoffs, and it's just kind of a matter of where they'll be 1 through 4.
I think
So
so. I think the Flyers haven't looked great. Hart has looked god awful. He's a sieve at this
yeah,
point. What, like an 875 save percentage or something like that. But
yeah,
I think that's
and
helped
just
them. I think those it's just a matter of seeding between them, the Bruins, the Penguins, and the Capitals.
that's what I think too. And just for reference, the Rangers play the Flyers the next 2 games. If the Rangers win tonight in regulation, they would actually be tied with the Flyers. So that's how far they've dropped off. Is it's really become right now a 4-team race. Um, do you think? And just to give you my opinion, I really think that this Islander team is going to be, at least in this East Division, going to be dangerous in the playoffs. Do you think that they've been of help to the fact that they've fattened up their record with games against the Sabres or Devils, or that's more just who's on the schedule and they would beat, pretty much anyone?
I was gonna say you can't help who you play. I mean, does it help to play a Sabres team that just looks completely lost out there and might not even win against most AHL teams? Sure. But
Right.
they've also they've beaten the Bruins.
Mhm.
They've gone about 500 against the Penguins. The Capitals have given them some problems, but hey, that's a talented team. You play who you play. No one's saying that. Again, that's kind of another narrative. No one's saying that about the Maple Leafs feasting on the Senators, the Knights.
Right.
Playing the Ducks.
Right.
Again, anyone in the Central, those top three teams playing Detroit, who just looked totally lost. Also, like you play who you play, and they've looked really good doing it. Sorokin has been a total godsend these past few games and looking really great behind Varlamov, and the goaltending, the defense, everything is just clicking now. Even the offense, which has been a problem in the power play for the past few years,
Mhm.
they look awesome.
Yeah, and it seems like Oliver Wahlstrom has definitely provided a nice offensive boost
What a shot
for a
that
team
kid
that
has!
seriously,
It's
seriously, great shot. The kid can score goals.
it just snaps off, man. It snaps off his twig, and it's do I want to say it's Austin Matthews? Austin Matthews has a very specific style to his shot that goalies can't pick up on. But Wallstrom, I don't think is too far behind, honestly, in terms of just that natural ability to snap the puck to the back of the net. I think as he gets more playing time, he's just going to be, that much better. Traditionally, this team has brought along their young players very slowly. I mean, we've seen it with him, we've seen it with Dobson, we've seen it, with Bellows. But I think they're, as much as it frustrates fans to want to see that 20-year-old, stud player really come up and take the reins, like they go about developing talent in the right ways. I can't really argue with the results.
Yeah, and it's interesting with Anders Lee out now. Obviously, I think it hurts the team just sort of from that leadership standpoint. And obviously, he was producing on the ice as well. Do you think that Lou Lamoriello is going to look to trade for, let's say, just as an example, for a Taylor Hall, or does he stay the course, keep the assets? Where do you see this going with a couple of weeks to go till the
So like
deadline?
some of the insiders have talked about this, the Freemans of the world, they've talked about um, Dustin Brown from the Kings possibly, but he has another year and a fairly high cap hit for a cap strap team. So I don't know. But I think the general consensus around Lou, and it's usually hard to get any information out of him, period, is that
Yeah,
they're going to look to fill that spot. You can't have Leo Komarov playing first line minutes and then dragging his ass up and down with Barzal on Barzal's wing. So, you
yeah,
hope that they, maybe Wallstrom or Bellows, one of the young guys, moves up, or they just find someone else to really fill that gap right now because, well, I think the talent is there. They are a little bit shallow on the offensive side in terms of depth. So you'd love to kind of see them bring in some outside help just for the year, especially, with Anders on long-term IR, they have a little bit of cap space to play with for this year
mhm.
with maybe an expiring contract somewhere.
Yeah, I could definitely see them making some type of trade at the deadline. You'd like to not give up a first round pick. And, knowing that they've traded away some draft picks recently, I'm sure Lou will try to be smart with thinking about now, but also not kind of burning the future
Yeah, and I'll
also.
and I'll say too, I think that with the second rounder they got with the Avalanche, and having some of their assets already, I think that it could be actually this could be a great time for them to really, maybe throw in, Leo's contract with a couple years left, maybe a Clutterbuck with some contract with some term left, or just one of those kind of higher price players that, you know, might be a detriment with a flat cap to say, give us this guy and we'll up it with a pick, but you also take on this contract to one of these bottom teams. So I think
Right.
Lou's actually in a better spot than a lot of people realize. So we'll see what happens with him.
And there was rumors last year at the deadline, and they never came to fruition. And I don't think that they'll revisit it, but there was those rumors about Zach Parise going to the Honors, and Andrew Ladd would go the other way. I'm not sure with the way things are right now
The
that
problem
they'd
with
be able to
Parisi
pull off
is
that type of
again, yeah,
trade.
it's that multi-year. When
Yeah,
Anders comes back, they're going to be right up against it again next year. Might have to do something similar again, like what they did with Devon Taves. So,
right,
would you love to see that? Because Ladd is just who knows where that guy is. I couldn't even tell he was on the taxi squad at this point down
right. Is
AHL.
he in
Like, who knows
Bridgeport?
if he's
Yeah.
So, of course, you love it in a perfect world, but who knows if it's going to happen again? Term is king at this point with the flat cap
Mhm.
era.
So far this year, who are some players that you've um, maybe have exceeded expectations, or you've just been a real big fan of, and then also on the flip side, players that have maybe disappointed a little bit?
So let's start off with players that have disappointed. We'll start off with the negative first. I
Mhm.
feel like every year at this point, and he's still relatively young. Beauvillier's been kind of inconsistent at this point. He's been with the team, I want to say, since 19 or 20, but he's been super inconsistent at this point compared to some of his contemporaries. He's gotten, second, third line minutes. So he hasn't exactly been first line, but he's sitting at 8 points, behind people like Matt Martin, Adam Pellick, and that's the guy that, if you ever
Right.
go into an Islanders forum, they're like, this is the year Beauvillier is going to take that next step. This is the year, he's going to become that true goal scorer, that true energy player.
Mhm.
And just the inconsistency. You might think that he might be a deadline piece as well and try and sell high on him because he's just been so. I know the bubble, he looked real good in those beginning few rounds, but tapered off a little bit. And I just think that he's just not the player that they really hoped. If you remember, he came up, he was drafted the same year as Barzell and actually came up
Mhm.
first, and they thought he was going to be that real great two-way player, and he's shown the energy, but just when the rubber hits the road, he hasn't been that player that they needed him to
Right.
be.
And it seems like his biggest impact has been, key goals like in the shootout or even that overtime goal. But I guess maybe you're not seeing enough 5-on-5 play
No,
from
no, he does
Beauvillier.
some great PK work again as that energy guy, but he really reminds me of kind of like you remember when they had Kuhlman. Everyone always loved Kuhlman, the energy he brought, but Kuhlman always was a step behind. I kind of feel like that's the way with Beauvillier. He's always just like a half step behind the puck, and he can't make the play happen on a consistent enough basis. Sure, he's had great moments again because the skill is there for him to do it, but you just want to see more out. He's 23 this year and he's been in the league for 3, 4 years. You want to start to see a little bit more out of him.
Mhm. And I guess just that line in general has been just a little bit underwhelming with Brock Nelson centering it, and I guess Josh Bailey still on the other side.
This is a team that I promise you, I know we kind of dread that expansion draft. I guarantee you that Lou Lamoriello is licking his chops for us to unload like a Josh Bailey or maybe even a Brock Nelson with that longer term contract that they have and leave them exposed for someone like Seattle to take. Because you're right. I
Mhm.
mean, they've especially in the beginning of the season, they've been non-existent. Brock Nelson's bounced back a little bit. All of a sudden, he's racked up a few points. It took him first to start on the power play, and he really didn't have too many 5-on-5 points. But he's got 18 points this year. He's a point again. Anders hasn't played the past few games, but he's only a point behind Anders. So he's getting his mojo a little bit back. And same thing with Josh. Josh is a huge assist guy. He's got 14 assists, only 4 goals. But
Uh,
I mean, yeah, that whole line's kind of been underwhelming. It's kind of been a 2A, 2B situation almost between their line and the Peugeot line.
which is interesting. Now, I guess on the flip side, obviously, and I feel like the stats don't necessarily indicate just how well Matt Barzell has been playing. I think he's been slowing down on the stat sheet, but just obviously he makes an impact, every time I watch the
Oh
Islanders.
yeah, and you have to. The Islanders are such an eye test team where you really have to kind of look at the
Of
system they're
course.
playing.
Hmm.
If you just look at straight up on the stat sheet, that doesn't
Of
tell the
course.
whole story.
Of
I mean, he's
course.
always starting off kind of below those dots, really helping on the defensive end, and the way he's able to just move the puck through the zone and kind of make stuff happen, even though he's always kind of start off probably 20, 30 feet below anyone else. And he either makes a breakaway happen with his speed, but not necessarily getting those opportunities in general that, Rangers team might be doing that aren't as defensively minded as there. But like he continues to be so much fun to watch, and and it's awesome to see his game grow not only on the defensive side but on the offensive side too. He's giving up the puck a little bit more and expecting it to get back. He's not doing what Butch likes to call the Barzell carousel, basically, where he's circling the zone 2 or 3 times and trying to make too much happen on his own. He's really kind of taking that next step in his game, and again, he's only 23 and is only just going to get better and better, man. It's awesome to
Yeah,
watch.
he is such an important piece to that team, and the Islanders really are some of their parts group. I mean, really, and there's talent on the roster, but just the structure. But Barzell is such a key cog
And
to that engine.
oh, for sure. And I'll say this too, though. I think Trotz is really, in terms of the system, taking it to the next step as well, where Letty for so long kind of seemed, and kind of in the middle of that contract seemed lost, especially towards the end, right before Trotz there, where he had that absurd plus minus. And I know that's not everything, but like he was
Yeah,
getting up to -30, -40 towards that last season there and just looked completely out of sorts. And this year he's got 21 points. He's looking super
amazing.
strong, taking it through the zone. And it's been like a very nice, I think losing Boychuk was going to hurt him more than a lot of people realize, but he's really kind of taken again. It was 2 steps back, and he's kind of taken 2 steps forward and really leveled out and
It,
shown what he can do.
and he's yeah, I mean, an assist machine. Is Letty Mayfield considered the second pair, or is it or when Dobson's healthy? I know he plays with Green,
I would.
or is it kind of interchangeable?
It's slightly interchangeable. I would say I think that Trotz trusts Letty a little bit more on that second pair with Mayfield.
Yeah.
Um, but again, this is a team that can run all 4 lines out of you, all 3 D pairs. And I think
Yep.
that's why, again, to the detriment of some Islanders' belief in Trotz at some points, that's why you see people like Komarov out there because Trotz really can trust all those people to know where they'll be at all times and really, know his system inside out and play the style he wants. And again, you can't argue with the results.
No, and they really just, they lose Lee, and they're just able to, at least early on, it's no big deal. They're able to make up for that. You throw Kiefer Bellows in the lineup, he's able to contribute. You mix and match, and again, and Pajot, even though they're very structured in terms of what they have at the center ice position, Pajot's somewhere where he can kind of plug and play and maybe throw him if he wanted to with Barzell and Eberle.
And when the Rangers originally traded for Zibanejad from the Senators, how high I was on him.
Oh
And
yeah,
that trade killed me at the time because I thought the Honors for sure could have used that help up the middle for, he looks so good for the Rangers. I know he's having a super off season this year, but if you look at the picture as a whole, you can't argue with him. And for Lou to get JG Pajot and to sign him to this long-term deal and have his faith in, he didn't look too great kind of right before everything ended with COVID, and the team as a whole kind of looked a little bit out of sorts. But for him to kind of be accepted, you see all the kind of behind the scenes videos with him, playing ping pong, goofing off with the team. He's out there fighting people on the ice, kind of helping out his teammates. And again, 20 points, 10 and 10. He's doing it all. He kills penalties. He's on the power
right.
play. He's a speedster. It doesn't matter who you put it. If it's Leo on his wing, if it's Bellows on his wing, if it's that traffic cone MDC on the wing, who I know he
You
gets.
forgot about Ross Johnston, who
And
hasn't played in a while.
hey, Ross the boss definitely serves a purpose, but I don't get how you can sign him and Martin at the same time when they're basically the same interchangeable player. But you know, going back to Pajot, man, he just nothing affects this guy negatively. He just sits there. He contributes any way, any shape, any form, and just what a signing by Lou.
Yeah.
Honestly, to have that
Trust
faith in him.
trust me, as a Ranger fan, I know all too well about Pajot. He scored 4 goals against the Rangers in the playoffs in 2017, so he's always been a Ranger killer. And for him to play as a third line center, it's pretty solid. And his great two-way game, he's really been tremendous, and he scored key goals as well. It seems like he's always coming up in the clutch for you guys. Um, so yeah, really for the Islanders, there's not a whole lot bad to say. Obviously, the Lee injury is a bit of a downer, but Sorokin is improving every game, and
And that's another.
you
Let me
know,
tell you this. I hope whoever does the honors PR is listening. Hire me because they are terrible at controlling their own narrative. Kind of. I know we talked about at the top with the two kind of different storylines, but Sorokin looks again, eye test with them looked really good. His glove was super quick. He was moving across the crease super quick. But every goal he kind of gave up in the beginning, he gave up a few softies, don't get me wrong. But they were always from weird angles and coming from, the KHL to the NHL and the different rinks. I felt like he never really had like that depth perception that he really needed. And I've never played goalie, so I can't say for sure, but it just looked like he was out of sorts with picking up the puck kind of, especially along that half board there. And all of a sudden, I think he's worked with Mitch Korn, who's just the goalie whisperer. And all of a sudden, again, only 25 years old, and this guy should be like the mainstay wall behind this defense for years, and just looks so good, so fast. You know, will eventually be cream of the crop NHL goalie, I think, at some point.
and I guess tell me what you think as far as when the playoffs roll around. Will it be a hot hand situation? Will Varlamov get that game one start, or will the remaining 20 plus games determine that?
Knowing Trotz, if I were to bet the mortgage, I'd say that Varlamov is going to get that game one start, just because again, veteran presence, has been in the system a little bit longer. I mean, you can't argue, has been playing super well as well, and we'll
Yes.
get some outside Vezina consideration. I don't think he'll ultimately win it, but again, listen, if you're playing for a winning team and you have numbers like he has, you you can't argue with it. So I mean, if they roll him out day one and just roll with that, and he looks good, why fight it? I know Sorokin's time will definitely come. I think he'll definitely get some starts here and there. And again, I think this compressed schedule really helps him. I'm sure the playoffs again will probably follow some type of similar format in terms of schedule, where there might be a couple more back to backs than we're seeing. Um, so I think it'll again to the Islanders, 4 lines, 3 defensive pair, 2 goalies situation. Just it works in their favor.
Very much so. And last couple of questions about the Islanders. So Do you feel with the success they've had at home that getting the top seed or getting the second seed is important
I
going into the
I
playoffs?
think so. Only again, Trotz is just a master at his game, and I think he knows he does. He has to do his homework and just knowing who to roll out and having that last change and the last say in all those matchups really plays to his strength. I think that every game in a shortened season is super important, but even more so for the Islanders, I think, because not only are they fighting against the playoffs in a very tough division, they're fighting for that top seed and that home field advantage, that home ice advantage. So I think it matters to them more than most teams for sure, considering their coaching.
And then jumping ahead to the playoffs, any teams that you'd prefer to see, not prefer to see, or just whoever's on the schedule will be ready.
I think whoever on the schedule will be ready for. Honestly, that the Islanders play, it amazes me because people say, "Oh, it's such a slow pace," even though they're mid pack of the team scoring for sure. But they play playoff hockey year round. They don't have to change up their style at all and kind of tighten up at all like you see some teams do during the playoffs because they're already playing that style and scoring points while playing it as well. So I think that it's obviously teams like Tampa and I think the Avalanche have been just on such a hot streak now that they're all kind of healthy and COVID free for the most part. Obviously, you hope that maybe they face a bump or two on the road on the way to possibly seeing one of those teams for sure. But I mean, within the East, I think they'll figure it out with the Capitals, who I know have given us problems, but I don't fear anyone else in the East in particular. And I again, bring on any team and see what happens. They took the eventual champion Tampa Bay Lightning to Game 6 of overtime and gave them hell for it. So they've shown
Yeah,
they can play with the best of them for sure over the past couple of years, despite people continuously doubting them.
yeah. I think that the Islanders. I don't. I don't know where they'll finish in the division. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't finish first, and they easily could. But I actually think that I feel more comfortable about what they'll do in the playoffs, and I think that they should have a pretty decent time getting out of the East. Believe it or not, the only team that maybe I could see giving them problems if they turn it around would be Boston, even though the Islanders have been 4-0 against them. And even still, I got to give the Islanders the
And I'll
edge.
say,
But I think,
yeah, Boston we haven't played at home yet, so it will be interesting to see kind of when
right,
they control the matchup, and they might be putting out their
right,
perfection line against Barzell or Pajot's
right.
line if they're super hot. So we'll see what happens there. But again, after years and years of getting just the absolute shit kicked out of them by the Bruins, man, it's nice to see them as an Islander fan
Right.
finally figure them out.
You're listening to New York's #2 sports podcast. If you love New York sports as much as the boys do, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. Your engagement helps the show grow. And now, back to the program.
Things are pretty good in Islander land. Let's touch a little bit on the Rangers. Obviously, this is a Ranger centric channel. So, you know, all the listeners have heard, all the shit that I've spoken about. But, really, it's been a very strange year so far and a lot of ups and downs. And even just beyond the COVID, just with D'Angelo and Panarin and some injuries as well. It's been an up and down year, but right now they seem to be turning a corner a little bit.
Is
Um,
it because your
but
coach is gone? Do you need to
eh,
fire David?
David Quinn, yeah, I think it's a narrative that makes sense. But to be fair, Quinn's feeding Knobloch all the information. But it's certainly funny that Quinn is out in the first game the Rangers win 9-0. So I think there is something to be said about David Quinn, and I do like the cut of his jib, but when you stack him up against the other coaches in this division, Barry Trotz, Mike Sullivan, Peter Laviolette, Bruce Cassidy, so on and so forth, David Quinn just doesn't compare. Like, when you think about the Rangers and what their identity is, I think,
Let me ask
you
you
know,
this: What
it
is what is the Rangers' identity? Like, this is a team that I feel like that is in such transition when you watch them.
mhm,
You know,
yeah,
they have a couple high scoring defensive guys. Bushnevich is really having a bounce back season. What's their identity? Do they have an identity at this point? Or are they still trying to figure it out?
I think that what you're seeing lately, it's kind of controlling the game and having that kind of fast pace. I don't want to say pretty plays, but kind of where and I think Panarin coming back kind of helps with the swagger of the team. Is you're seeing the goal scoring and you're just seeing like what they can do in the offensive zone. And when they have certain lines rolling, when they have the Zibanejad is obviously a key. He's come back now, and he's starting to look like the old Mika, and that was destroying them. They couldn't win if he was going to continue to play like that. But the one thing I will say about this team, defensively, so much better than last year. I'm not sure if you know this. The Rangers are second in the league in on the penalty kill. And on the flip side, with the great offensive personnel they have, they're like 27th on the power play. So it's been a weird reversal, and their defensive play has certainly improved this year. But I think a huge problem with them is they're just they weren't getting those timely goals. Protecting the lead has been a bit of a problem. Their goal differential, again, aided by the 9-0 win, is right around where the 4 East playoff teams are, but they're not finding ways to get the points when they need to. Is a big problem.
How do you feel, man? I'll tell you this too, and kind of
Ask away.
to your point about the penalty. Does Miller play on the penalty kill? Again, having not
Yes.
watched every game, watching him and Fox, man, zip around the ice must make Rangers so happy. It's hard to bring around defensemen like that. They're awesome
Yeah.
to watch, and they got that it factor, man. Whenever you watch them on the ice,
Adam Fox doesn't get the recognition that he deserves.
Long
Like,
Island's own
people
Adam Fox, too, by the way.
Long Island's own Adam Fox from Jericho, New York. It's really unbelievable. And you see some of these like mock USA 2022 Olympics rosters. I don't see how Adam Fox isn't on there. The guy, he really is tremendous, and I feel like he really is very underrated. Doesn't really score that many goals. More of a guy who has great vision. His IQ. He doesn't have that much
Oh
speed.
yeah,
All these little moves he makes, he's just fantastic. So they found something. That Lindgren Fox pair is great. K'Andre Miller, being as young as he is, he makes his mistakes, but you could see the potential. So you gotta like what you see there. But to be fair, on the flip side, it's been a little bit frustrating, certainly. And they're young, but I have to bring up Alexis Lafreniere and Capo Caco, and it sucks that they're not making that immediate impact that I think some fans would have hoped for.
and I think especially with Capo Caco, man, when it was him and Hughes, kind of 1 and 2, right? And we all knew it was going to be the two of them. Everyone thought that Kako was going to be the one that made the immediate impact for the style of his game. Everyone thought he was ready to play big boy hockey, and I think the fact that he's looked better according to a few of the pundits, and kind of watching a game here and there, he doesn't look necessarily totally lost at this point, and it's hard to look as bad as he did kind of in the beginning, but you have to start worrying a little bit about his game. I know he's still young, but his game might not translate to where he's kind of a Bailey type player, where he's a first round pick that just contributes in other ways and doesn't pan out the way you hope that he pans out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly has to be on the table. And it's funny, Kako this year is a lot better than last year in terms of just he did look lost last year. His speed's a little bit better. Now he's playing with Panarin and Strome, at least as recently as last game. And I think that line was doing really well until Panarin left. So I think to put them back together is going to be key. But yeah, you want to see a little bit more production, but fans need to be patient. Lafreniere, to me, like between the two of them, Kako looks better than Lafreniere. Lafreniere definitely needs work. And it's unfortunate you can't just step in right away, like a Connor McDavid or an Austin Matthews. It doesn't happen. And it's hard to envision him ever being anything like that. But, I guess patience is going to be the key for Ranger fans.
I think so. And I think you're just going to need to kind of see how things shake out on the wing. I think of all the years to kind of win the lottery, right after you sign Kreider on the wing there, and then have another winger that's the clear number one, it hurts a little. It has to hurt just a little bit, I think, for Rangers fans.
Yeah. It would have been nice, to have one of them be a center.
Right.
Would have, of course, been preferable.
Now, let me ask you this: who do you? I think you're leaning more towards Fox than Miller in terms of the defenseman that you think is playing a little bit better this season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this: you're able to start a team with Wahlstrom and Sorokin, or Fox and Shesterkin? Who are you taking?
Fox and Shesterkin, I'm not even thinking twice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well, just
to each
because
their own.
well, Fox is well, here's the thing. Defense is such an important position. Um, I guess the better question would be like Dobson to
Right.
Fox, which I know Dobson is not quite there yet. But yeah, Fox is just amazing. And Shesterkin to Sorokin, here's how I'd say it, and to your point about the statistics. So, because I think Shesterkin's really good, but Sorokin's stats are better, and I think that's a product a little bit of just the systems. On that flip side, Ryan Strome and Matt
I
Barzell
knew this
have
was
identical
coming.
stats.
I knew
So,
this was coming.
just to both of that, I think that's where the statistics can be misleading on both ends. We know Barzell's way better than Strome,
It's just the
and I think
style.
Shesterkin's numbers are
I'll give you that. But again, to anyone out, if there, I'm sure there's more Rangers fans that listen to this than Islanders fans. Turn on a game when Sorokin is playing, and watch this guy. Watch how quick this guy is out of the box, man. It's something special when you see it. And I who knows if how he'll develop, but he's got a natural gift that just a lot of goalies just don't have these days, where a lot of his positioning and coaching and the modern game, but he's got a certain just quickness about him, man, that not a lot of people have.
yeah, I've been impressed by him, and I think that he could be more of a factor than Varlamov when it's all said and done this season. Not to take anything away from Varlamov, but Sorokin does look impressive, and I can't wait for Shesterkin versus Sorokin. I think that that's going to be a really fun Russian goalie matchup that we've yet to see.
I think so too. And how, yeah, Georgiev, it looks like, has played just about the same amount as Shesterkin. Has he been? Do they view him as a piece that'll help them moving forward, or has it just been to split things up a little bit? What's it?
The organization likes him now. Granted, Shesterkin he's finally making his return tonight. He's been out for 3
Gotcha.
weeks, so but they kind of viewed Georgiev as a 1B. Clearly, that's not the case. Igor is definitely the number one. Georgiev's been a disappointment this year. There's no question about it. So, not so high on him. He's actually younger than Shesterkin by a little bit, even though he came up a little bit earlier. But yeah, I'm kind of down on Georgiev at this point. But we'll see what he does the rest of the way.
Fair enough. And the last question I'll ask you here: you
Sure.
have Pelican, Pulak, and Fox and Miller, and you're able to build out your defense first. Are you taking the defensive defense pair, or are you taking the offensive defense pair?
Like, are you asking me between Pollock and Miller
Yep.
Fox? Well, Miller isn't really like Lindgren plays with just in terms of that question.
Absolutely. I
M-
understand that they're not playing together, but you're able, if you're starting a team today and you're able to take one defensive pair or the other, who are you
Like,
taking?
okay, well, and do I have a winning? Is it a win now team or is it a futures
You're
team?
starting from
That
you're
really,
starting from scratch.
if I'm starting from scratch and I gotta go, then I have to go with Miller and Fox. And I think, and it's tough for me to say that because I think Pellick and Pollock are awesome. I think Pellick in particular gets way less notoriety than he should. He's a great shutdown defenseman, Adam Pellick.
And I'll say to this too, they had in 31 Thoughts, um, Elliot Friedman talked about this. He talked about just Pellick just not having enough credit. And he mentioned on his podcast too, and this is again to the Islanders not controlling their narrative. He goes, I reached out to the Islanders and they said, we'll see what we can do. We like people not talking about us. We like it. We like being the background. If Pellick is on any
Yeah.
other team, man, and I know the Norse is turning into an offensive defenseman kind of trophy, but if there's a defensive defenseman kind of trophy, the way he plays a game with that, he just has that stick that snaps out and breaks up plays all the time. He's always in position. He just, despite the fact that he looks like a beer leaguer that you could beat on any weekend, he just looks awesome on the ice. And I think Pulak will start finding. I didn't put him in the disappointments, but he hasn't found the net just yet. But again, he's also having one of those great defensive seasons. So how can you argue with it?
It's a great shutdown pair. There's no question about it. And just to your question, more so just because Miller and Fox are very young, whereas not that Pellick and Pullock aren't, but I think if I wanted if I'm on a win now team, then I would take Pellick and Pullock for sure. As Miller is, still a little bit, he's young, he's raw.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
So
they're both 26. They
we'll
they
take some
both
help
have
then.
they're relatively young, but they have a little bit more seasoning than the other two. So I mean, fair enough. It just, I
Yeah.
guess it's your philosophy, but man, it's hard to pick as a defensive pair. They're just Unreal.
Also, Adam Fox, I can't get enough of the guy. I just like he's so good, it's scary. Like and like Pierre McGuire basically like creamed his pants when he was calling the Ranger game about Fox. It was a little disturbing, but well, Rangers Islanders have 5 more games this year. They've yet to play at the Coliseum, so would love to have you back on. If anything happens big for the trade deadline, and that's around the time Rangers Islanders play again. So would love to have you back on, before the season ends, and then we'll get into some playoff previews.
Let's do it.
Sounds great, brother. Great having you on.
Islanders forever, brother.
Oh God.